Hey, Blair Packham here from Song Studio. Don't forget to like this video, share it with songwriter friends or people you think might be interested, or subscribe. Check out songstudio.ca for more information.
Here's another peek at what we did at Song Studio Online last August. Hope you enjoy.
I want to welcome our guest, Brian Heatherman. If you give him a virtual round of applause. Brian has had a varied career in the music business, and is a lifer, music business veteran, and he's been a manager most recently, although involved in other projects simultaneously, an artist manager, but also director of A&R for Universal Music Canada. He's a very active guy. He's got great taste in music. He's got an infectious joie de vivre, and I like him, and he's my friend, and I'm glad that you're here, Brian. So,
thank you.
What an introduction. I like him, and he's my friend. It's like grade 3 or something.
Yeah, that's the best thing you said. That's great.
There you go. So, Brian, how I sometimes start these things. It's funny, having friends on this in this forum. I realize, there's some really basic stuff that I don't know about these guys. These people. So for you, I would say if I ran into you at a party and I didn't know you, and I said, "What is it you do?" as we do at parties, how would you answer? How do you self-identify professionally?
Well, I think it's sort of the most obvious thing that I've been doing for the last 20 years is a manager and record label. So, I don't always manage the artists that I sign, and I don't always sign the artists that I manage. But generally in this current climate, the last 10, 15 years, that's kind of the way it works out, because either, you have an artist that's established that's trying to get away from a major label, or you have a young up and coming artist that the major label's not interested in. So, because they're not right where they want them to be, they're not already a proven track record. So yeah, I would say, primarily manager and record label, and, part-time publisher, if you will, because a lot of the bands that I work with on the label and management side will do like a co-pub arrangement, which is, just make sure I joke to the artist, make sure that I get my commission on time, because it comes direct from SoCan. And it also allows us to do a lot of film and TV and sync stuff. And that, I'd have to call them and say, most times I call the artist anyway and ask if they're cool with it. But, it's something that these days you can't waste any time with anything. If someone calls you, you say yes. Yeah. And I like to be able to say yes whenever anybody calls me and says, "Hey, could we use this song for a commercial, or could we use this song for a whatever?"
Right. Things move quickly, and people expect answers really quickly. And if you control the publishing of a particular catalog, you can answer very quickly on their behalf. But as you say, as a courtesy, it is always a good thing. If it's an ad for the Canadian Nazi Party of Canada,
right.
That's redundant. Canadian.
And that's
the Nazi Party of
like,
Canada.
Yeah, that's usually a conversation that you have sort of at the very beginning. It's like some people are like, well, you know what, I'm against Coke. So if Coke ever comes, we're not, or
Nestle,
certain things like feminine products or something that people are just uncomfortable, their music being attached to, something, right. whatever their personal thing is,
Right. Dan Hill recently licensed a song, Sometimes When We Touch, actually was licensed to a toilet paper commercial.
There you go. I say bring it on, but
I say bring it on. Yeah. That's right.
We all use it.
So we've, all right. So we've established that at the party. And then of course the next question is from the person at the party. Do you work with anybody I know, or have you worked with anybody I know?
Yeah, I think so. Hope so. I'm trying to think of who the people that I've worked with over the years. Currently, clients are a band called Pretty Archie, a band called Mobile, which were that band from the early 2000s. They were a Universal act, but then they broke up. Now they're back together. Western Swing Authority out of Kitchener. They're sort of a Western Swing band. Just recently parted ways with Men Without Hats in the last month or two. Worked with them for the last 2.5 or so years. They're still on the label, but I don't manage them anymore.
Right.
And over the years, man, I've managed like a lot of acts. Andy Suchansky, Derek Miller, Susie McNeil, Holly McNarland. Who else?
You
Many others.
managed Susan McNeil from Ireland?
No, Susie McNeil, the pop.
Oh, Susie
girl.
McNeil, the pop singer
Yeah.
from yeah. She's fantastic.
An excess roster.
Yeah, where's she at these days?
I have no idea, actually. I think she was working with. She still does some solo work, but she was in Steven Tyler's country band might still be.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I forgot about that.
he does when he's not doing Aerosmith or in rehab. He does country shows.
Really, that could be said about all of us, though.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Including the Aerosmith part, which would be weird. Right. So, and what was the other name that you said that twigged? You worked with Men Without Hats, but there was another name that you mentioned.
Andy or
Andy Suchansky. So, did you work with Andy as a songwriter or as a performing artist?
purely mostly as a manager. So really, technically, covered sort of both angles. But
Right.
I managed him up until, I guess, I don't even know what year it was, but until the time that he sort of decided that he was really just going to focus solely on songwriting and not perform as an artist anymore. So
Okay, so
him and Lisa moved to LA, and I assume she represents him down there now.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because he really made that decision, even though he was a very strong performer. But to make that decision, he was, that he was just going to be a songwriter. Interesting, that he would do that. Okay, so so we've met at the party, and I found out that you worked with people that I know, and so I'm impressed. So then I ask, I'm going to leave the party soon, by the way, but just as a framework for the questions. So when you what takes up the bulk of your day, when you're working with, you've got a handful of people you're working with right now.
Yeah.
Is every day different?
Every day's different. It's people ask me that question. It's so hard to answer because every day really is different. But I mean, the label takes up a lot of my time. I mean, obviously, particularly in the last couple of years with not a lot of options for live or things of that nature. I mean,
right.
You're really trying to steer the band, at least the bands certainly that are signed to the label, really starting to steer their career via capturing, a crowd, whether that be through social media or some other form of marketing, and trying to sell records, because that seems to really be the driving factor now. If you're either, a famous, social media star, or you get a break. I mean, a great example of that would be the Dead South, who I managed for many, many years, from about 2014 to 2019. And, they're a bluegrass band from Saskatchewan, and they pretty much were playing legions, only in Saskatchewan, and, playing the odd date outside of Saskatchewan
Right.
when I met them. And, through them, just being this incredibly unique, band, and also just a really powerhouse live band, we caught a break through our social media work on YouTube. And the video now sits at 340 million views on YouTube.
340 million. Oh my God.
We caught a break, and it went to 1, and then it went to 2 million, and then it was at 6 million, and then it just didn't stop. And it was just funny because it would be, I would go to parties and people would ask, like you did, what do you do? And I would say, I work with this band, the Dead South. And they're like, oh, I saw that video on YouTube. So there probably isn't very many people who haven't seen that video on YouTube. But and they went from playing to 200, 300 people a night to literally playing to 5,000 people a night almost overnight. Like, it just blew up, and it blew up worldwide.
Wow. So you said a couple of times we caught a break.
Yeah.
But some of it is conscious. Some of it isn't. We all need luck. But what did you do to get the band in that position? Are you the social media manager, or you?
No.
I mean, to be honest, I've done, more and more of my time in the last 6 to 8 months has become something I really don't like doing. But we spend a lot, like I spend a lot of time on social media now myself, just because, I've hired people over the years to do it,
Yeah.
and, truth is the people that I've hired really nobody's really super delivered, quite frankly.
Right.
We were trying to crack into TikTok, and TikTok is just one of the most painful pieces of social media I think I've ever been involved with. I mean, it's just the stuff that's on there is absurd.
Right.
The fact that people watch this for hours and hours and hours just boggles my mind. But, it's a huge part of now promoting music for sure. And, I went through the process of hiring a few people over the years to try and help us with TikTok, and we just didn't seem to get anywhere. So I said, okay, you know what? Instead of spending thousands of dollars hiring other people, I am actually going to make a point to commit to TikTok. And about, 12 or maybe shy of 12 months ago, 8 months ago, we set up an account, or we already had the account set up, but I just started going on every day and spending hours on there and figuring out what works. And, since that time, I mean, we're probably one of the most followed indie labels, certainly in Canada for sure. And, a ton of views, and, it's some of our videos have 120,000 views, and, 400, 500 likes, or, 3,000 likes or whatever. So, I guess really the shorter answer to your question, sorry, would be that, they, that I do have somebody that sort of does my social media every day, but I've just felt the need to sort of step in. And I think that comes from, the success we had with the Dead South, where, our plan was, we made this video. The video took 6 months to make because they shot it in like 30 different locations. And they basically, it looked like the background was changing, but the band wasn't, even though, it was shot very much old school way with no real sort of tricks. And, because they're so unique looking, and, because the song was so kind of wacky, the bass player actually plays on a cello. And the song was wild. I mean, people started attracting to the video and to the song, but then, we caught some breaks with a few, different placements that we put it on. And then, where the luck comes in is when you go from, 300,000, it's pretty impossible to control that. I mean, even the best social media people, if they were being honest with you, would tell you that, you can't guarantee 1 million or 2 million views.
Right. Yeah.
You need some luck. And we got that luck on what we had been doing. And we follow the same pattern for a lot of our acts, but it doesn't necessarily have the same effect,
Right. Have you found it? Have you moved on to another song with them?
No, they ended up being stolen by another label because the band blew up, and
right.
Another label, you know how that works.
Yep. Oh, I do. And it's we talked about a mutual friend earlier who sent me to the Key to Bala, and he lost an act that he was managing that he loved dearly, you could tell when he talks about it, it still hurts, and so it must hurt to have that happen. You develop an act, and
it's sort of a for me the betrayal was both the label and the band, really, because I knew the other label very well.
Right.
So it was kind of a double whammy. But, it's like I've also been in this business for 35 years. So there's not much that happens that can surprise me, quite frankly. It's somewhat predictable,
Right. Yeah. And I suppose it's arguable. The other label might argue we're in a better position to deal with these numbers or this scale, So who knows?
100%.
Thanks for taking a glimpse with us inside the Song Studio workshop from last August. Stay tuned for more.